Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Real and the Rare. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Manmouth, along with Xavier McKnight, the X-Man. How you doing, Xavier? How's life on the west coast of Florida?
I'm doing well, Scott. Everything is well here in Sarasota and Bradenton here on the sun coast of Florida. Also, I'd like to take this time to use this platform to thank everyone for all of their birthday wishes for me on yesterday. It was a wonderful day. I turned 24 years old, just really blessed to be able to reach this milestone in my life, and I look forward to reaching many other milestones as well.
Well, you're only 33 years behind me, and 33 is my lucky number, so there's a good positive omen to that mathematical equation. So with that said, okay, I know you've been busy out in the Sarasota, Bradenton area, so let the audience know what you've been really up against out there first before we take care of the business at hand.
Well, I've been a prominent team member with my team at ABC7 WWSB in Sarasota. We have been out covering the peaceful protests and rallies that have been going on in the city in wake of everything that is going on with the Black Lives Matter movement and the most recent acts of police brutality during this year.
Yeah, you've had your hands full out there, haven't you?
Yes, some of these have been marches, some of these have been protests where everyone is standing still, but for the most part, I believe I've covered more marches, actually, than protests that are standing still. They have all been peaceful. There has been no rioting, there has been no looting, there has been no form of violence taking place. The most excessive thing that has mainly happened at some of these protests is sometimes the language can get a little rough, but I will take that as opposed to some of the other things that have taken place in other cities around this country and also around this world as a whole. So I'm very thankful to everyone who has been in attendance for these protests, that they have maintained some form of order and have refrained from taking part in activities that they shouldn't be taking part in while they are making their point known that they would like justice.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've been really busy at the WSAN network as well. We've had Black Lives Matter appear on the Sports Exchange, our new broadcast, No Limits. We've had a total of 5 shows pertaining to that topic. And I'll tell you what, Xavier, you know me long enough. I am not afraid to put anything on the air if it's pertinent and allows our listeners to benefit. But this will be our 6th rodeo with it, including getting the real and the rare involved with the Black Matters format. But I know we were hoping to have you on No Limits, but obviously something came up. It's no problem. But now you and I have that same platform here on the network so that you can at least individualize it yourself to talk about what we're about to do. But you know what? That's good. This is our 6th show, and I'm really happy that we put them together, and I expect the 6th one to be every bit as good as the last 5 that we put on the network. So with that said, Xavier, why don't you go ahead and lead off and tell me what's on your mind.
Well, before I start off, first off, I would like to say thank you to you, Scott, for allowing me to use this platform to address these very serious issues that are going on right now. And I will simply begin by saying we normally have fun here on The Real and the Rare, but we will not be having fun tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We will be having a very serious discussion about a very serious issue, not only in our country, but in our world today. And that is the social injustices, the acts of police brutality against minorities, in particular, Black Americans, Black men, Black women, and Black children in this country. And, God, let me just say this. Every single one of these that we hear that gets reported, they all bother me to a degree. But what I have tried to do over the past few years to keep myself from becoming overly angry, to keep myself from being overly raged, I try to numb myself to the realities of what's actually going on out here. I try to numb myself to it. I'm aware of it, and I use my voice and I use my social media platforms, and I support the movements in other ways that I can support it. But George Floyd was just a different one for me. Just like it was for everyone else, I'm not sure exactly what it was that really just set it off for me. And I'll just put it like this. The day after Memorial Day, when we all learned about this horrendous incident and this murder that took place in Minneapolis, I saw the video for the first time, and I did something that I don't ever do. I watched the video in its entirety with the volume up. Even with Ahmaud Arbery's case, the young man who was murdered in Georgia back in February, I watched that video, but I didn't watch it with the sound on because I knew what it would do to me. But with the George Floyd case, I watched that video with the sound on, and I actually watched it with the sound on by accident because I was working on something for our station. I was working on getting the promotion out there that those officers that were all involved in that incident had been fired. This is when the Minneapolis mayor came out the day after the murder took place and said that those officers were fired. And I'm just sitting there and I'm watching that video, all 8 minutes and 46 seconds of it. And I believe it's fair to say, Scott, that I have never been more angry in my life. I'll describe how my day was going up to that point for you. I was enjoying my day. I was listening to some really good classic old school R&B music. I was listening to some Barry White. I was listening to some Marvin Gaye. And I really was enjoying my day. I was enjoying the peaceful vibes that I was getting off of that music. And as soon as I watched that video, as soon as I heard the merciless cries of George Floyd in that video, as soon as I heard him say, "I can't breathe," which is something that we heard years ago as well from another black man who was murdered by police. As soon as I heard him crying for his mama, and as soon as he was taken out on a stretcher with his lifeless body at that point, my entire day at that point, May 26, 2020, was sent straight to hell. And I don't believe I picked myself back up to any degree until maybe 4 or 5 days later. It really did something to me that this stuff has never done to me before. And I see that it did something to our country and it did something to our world as a whole. I do feel like change is among us, but before we speak on that, I would like to get your reaction when you saw this video for the first time as well.
Disgusting. I don't normally give one-word answers, but I'm giving you one now. Disgusting. I think this video, actually, when you think about it, we all know things have been building up for years with all the different things with Rodney King and all the other incidents that are out there. I think George Zimmerman. But when you talk about what happened to George Floyd, this is a straw that broke the camel's back, and that's what sent this country into the current state that it's in, and that's bad. It really is. So, I mean, you know, the straw that broke camel's back. How many times have you heard that line? There's a reason why cliches are what they are, right, Xavier? Okay? Because
yes,
they're very good, and they're there for a reason. But this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Enough is enough. It
definitely was, because I've never seen a response to something like this before. I'm old enough to remember the Trayvon Martin murder that happened. And I remember, in particular, Dwayne Wade and LeBron James and the Miami Heat players and organization coming out and being outspoken in support of Trayvon Martin's family and wanting to get justice for what had happened to him. And I remember the impact that also had on my friends, my student colleagues in high school at the time. I remember that impact that had on us. Now, I didn't necessarily participate in this, mainly because I really didn't know that it was going on. But there was one day, and I was in the 10th grade when this happened. There was a day that was set aside in America in March or April of 2012, where every high school kid in the country, especially Afro-Americans, were going to wear a hoodie to school, buy a pack of Skittles, and buy an iced tea in honor of Trayvon Martin. Well, I didn't really know much about what was going on because I wasn't huge on social media then like I am now. And this is right when Twitter was really starting to pop off, and I don't believe I created my first Twitter account until maybe 2013. So I really didn't know much about it then, but that was as much of an outcry as I had saw against a matter of this magnitude, close to what we saw with George Floyd. And that's not really saying much, because the outcry that we saw to the murder of George Floyd was an outcry that I've never seen in my life. Now, Scott, you're old enough to remember the tail end of the civil rights movement. So I'll ask you, do you remember there ever being an outcry this loud at any point in your life?
Yeah, when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. I mean, how big does that get? Yeah, I mean, here's a guy who died for a reason, and, he's revered, but he was way ahead of his time. Few people got to realize racism has been going on for the last better part of 400 years. You got the Civil War, you got Abraham Lincoln involved. Okay, now all of a sudden it takes an incident of this magnitude to finally wake up with everything. You realize that everything that the cause and effect that this has taken place has rubbed off in the sports community. Now, I don't know if you want to talk about the sports aspect later or stay on point. You let me know, because obviously we know some of the major developments that occurred in the South, but I'm kind of leaving you on point. But yeah, when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, things were really rough.
And yes, we will touch on some of the athletes that have been outspoken about all of this, and some of the sports leagues that have used their platforms as well about all of this. It's only right that we do that, because everything is connected as one right now, especially regarding this. And I'm glad that you brought up the murder of Martin Luther King, and I'm glad you brought it up for one particular reason, because 2 weeks ago, when the rioting and the looting first started to take place in Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, when she was trying to get her city back in order, and I applaud her for doing it. She did it the best way she could. She did it in a way that, I'll just go ahead and say it. It reminded me of a way that my mother, my aunt, and other black mothers that I know will try to keep their families in order, to keep their children in line, to try to prevent them from going out and getting involved in the wrong types of activities, pleading with them, begging them, almost being on the verge of tears. But she said something that was alarming to me, because I don't believe it to be factually correct. She said that when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, the city of Atlanta did not respond the way that those rioters and looters were out there responding. Well, Scott, history doesn't tell me that. History tells me that Atlanta and the country as a whole, especially in areas filled with lots of Afro-Americans, they were going crazy because their leader had been taken away from them. The hope that they had officially been taken away from them. That's just what history tells me. Of course, I wasn't alive in 1968, so I don't really remember that, but I watch a lot of documentaries involving the civil rights movement, because this is how I started to educate myself on this type of content and this stuff when I was a kid. I wanted to know more about my own history. I wanted to know more about where I came from. And Martin Luther King has always been someone that I have always looked up to. And just from what history tells me, from what video evidence tells me, people were, and I'm glad you said it, they were going crazy when this man was killed. So I'm glad that you brought that to the forefront. And, now let's speak a little on the rioting and the looting. I'd like to just simply say this right now. I am not in favor of looting. I am not in favor of rioting. But I will not apologize for any of the activity that has taken place in the past few weeks. I won't apologize for it, just simply because of the fact that black people feel that the peaceful protests, the singing of Kumbaya, the singing of We Shall Overcome, the singing of Amazing Grace, trying to peacefully bring people together, has not been as effective as it initially was supposed to be. And our latest example that we have of that, especially in the sports world, we go all the way back to 2016 when Colin Kaepernick, who initially sat for the national anthem during a preseason game, was contacted by a former military member who was a Green Beret who told him that it was actually disrespectful to sit. And he asked him, he said, so what would be a better way for me to go about it? And he actually suggested for Colin Kaepernick to kneel, which is why it continues to befuddle me to this day, why when people talk about having an issue with Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem, even though it had nothing to do with the flag at all, they always like to point out it's disrespectful to our troops. I don't get that. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's what they thought then, but that was then. This is now. To me, I don't like kneeling. I think you're going to see more of it, but to me, it's just a peaceful protest is really what it is. The problem with Colin Kaepernick was he was ahead of his time. Now tell me that it's really going to make a big deal that they're kneeling. In fact, Bill O'Brien went on record today that he's going to kneel himself. How many of these coaches around the NFL, and let alone players, are going to do it now? It's okay to do it now, but Colin hasn't gotten a paycheck in 4 years. The question, but there's a lot of different things. Is he going to get signed? I mean, these are things we'll probably talk about later in the broadcast. But when the Houston Texans coach Bill O'Brien says, I'm going to kneel, well, my goodness, you wouldn't have seen this 4 years ago, would you?
No, you definitely would have, especially with the late Bob McNair still being alive and owning the team then. We all know how Bob McNair felt about things like this. He is the man who infamously said that you can't let the inmates run the asylum. So, no, I couldn't have envisioned this 4 years ago from Bill O'Brien and anybody in the Houston Texans organization, and not many people in the NFL as a whole, too. It should be noted that Adrian Peterson also said that he will be kneeling during the NFL season as well.
Yeah, if he makes the team. Nobody says he's going to make the team yet. Who knows? The guy still has to make it in training. I think he will. Don't get me wrong. They need him. But, I'll, to me, put more faith that Bill O'Brien's employed before I'm sure that Adrian Peterson is part of the final roster. I think he will, but I'm not holding my breath on what he's going to do. And another thing about Adrian Peterson, it's not like his track record is squeaky clean either. Why do you think the Vikings got rid of him? Didn't want him.
Exactly. No. I definitely understand where you're going with that because, I mean, we can't forget about what happened in 2014 with Adrian Peterson. I won't speak too much in detail about it right now because that's not the purpose of this show. But as you said, he's not a squeaky clean individual.
Well, no, but I'm going to mention one thing that I should mention while the opportunity presents itself. Okay, when you talk about this broadcast being a difficult show, I think one of the most difficult shows that we have, and I'll make sure that I list it out there when we talk about it, is Martina McBride, child abuse, and Concrete Angel. Today's show, in my opinion, will be in line with that, albeit Black Lives Matter is an important topic, don't get me wrong, but don't look the other way in child abuse because they're both very difficult, touching subjects that we can't lose sight of, that this stuff must happen with child abuse as well as Black Lives Matters. So if you thought this was a difficult show...
I agree with you 100%. I'd like to say this as well because I actually appreciate you bringing that up because something else has started to take place in the past few weeks in wake of the Black Lives Matter movement as well, Scott.
What's that?
On social media, I'm not sure if you have been paying attention to this per se, but there have been a lot of victims of sexual abuse who have also been coming out now and telling their stories. And that takes a lot of bravery, that takes a lot of courage, and I applaud those individuals, and I am very sorry that they have had to experience those things that they have had to experience.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our main topic of the night is Black Lives Matter, and it should be. That's what we've talked about before, and we'll continue to talk about it throughout the night. But we can't lose sight of other major issues that we've heard a lot lately, and that being the child abuse, which has been going on for a long time. I don't see anybody out there, talking about it, protesting on that. I mean, a young child going through what we had talked about with Martina McBride, Concrete Angel, that was depressing too. Sexual abuse is really bad. I'm not going to devote a time, but the fact that we're at least bringing it up means that we're not afraid to dodge any particular subject, no matter the nature of the severity of it. But the civil rights movement, could go a lot of different ways. We can talk about the Al Campanises who got fired. Okay, back when he talked about African Americans not being equipped to be managers because of his comments on Nightline. This has been going on a long time. And we've talked about the fact that Howard Cosell and Jimmy the Greek would eventually lose their livelihoods. But yet we can't lose sight of what has occurred recently that's allowed us to get to this point. This is a volcano.
Yes, for sure.
Xavier, what we've seen over the last week or two is this has been a volcano waiting to erupt.
Oh, yes, I agree with you 100% because, as I said, I've tried to numb myself to the reality of all of these incidents that have taken place, at least over the past decade that I can remember. But I know others who have not numbed themselves to this. And I'll say right now that a lot of this is happening right now, of course, because we are still, most of us anyway, are still under some form of quarantine. We're still dealing with the pandemic. And even though it seems that people have forgotten about it, our numbers are actually increasing now more. So everyone still does need to continue to take the proper precautions there as well. But if everyone was still functioning in a normal circumstance of being able to get up and go to work every day and go out and participate in any extracurricular activity that they would like without having to worry about being penalized for it or anything like that, these protests wouldn't be happening out of the woodworks like they are right now.
Oh, but I could have told you COVID-19 was going to happen that way anyways. The second wave is coming sooner than we think. And I'll tell you what, people are outright negligent. I knew this was going to happen. I think actually my prediction is by the end of July and August it's going to get worse because people are outright negligent, stupid, and not doing what they've got to do. I realize that we're not talking about happy news, but there's perception and there's reality, Xavier, okay? COVID-19 being what it is. So, yeah, now we've got COVID-19. We got 2020 being a bad year. Now we got Black Lives Matter. I'm waiting to see what the third domino is going to drop later on in the year because that's where 2020 is going. 2020 used to be a good thing. That's when you got good vision. I don't see 2020 anywhere near that this time.
Well, Scott, what we heard leading into the year of 2020, this year that we're in now, the unpredictability that no one could predict at all, heard that 2020 is going to be the year of perfect vision. And technically, that is still a correct statement. The only difference to it is it's not the type of perfect vision that everyone else thought that they were going to get. What this year has been so far is an eye-opening year to where we all need to be aware of everything that is going on around us, and we need to be a part of some type of change that is taking place. Because, let's just go back as what history tells us. Almost every 100 years, the world has to readjust. The world has to change. We've had plagues and pandemics that have taken place in the world before. Not in our lifetimes before now, but they have happened throughout the history of time before then. The Spanish flu that took place in the early 1900s that killed lots of people. The bubonic plague that took place that killed lots of people. And segregation, Jim Crow, the Civil Rights Movement, slavery. These are all things that have taken place throughout the course of the past 401 years. Okay? We understand that. And I'd like to say the reason that we are still reaching this point today is simply because, and I've had this conversation with my mother, I've had this conversation with older black people as well. There was a point after 1968, in between the 1990s, to where I say that black people and Afro-Americans took their foot off the gas pedal as far as continuing to enlist real changes that needed to happen in America in favor of the black community and as far as equality and fairness goes. And the reason for that is because things started to get a little better. We were no longer segregated. Integration had taken place. It wasn't necessarily as difficult for black people to find jobs and to find sources of income, and they weren't necessarily being told, hey, you can't eat here, hey, you can't come inside here, hey, you can't go use that bathroom, hey, you can't use that water fountain. Those days were basically mainly gone at this point, and those black people who are now our elders of our community, they took their foot off the gas pedal to a degree with all of this stuff that was going on. And now you have this generation of late millennials and Generation Z, who I believe is a generation that hasn't been seen before. And the reason I say that, Scott, is because when these riots and these acts of looting first started taking place, I remember calling many of my relatives and saying, I've been telling you all for the past decade that every day I go to school with people that say, we are not our parents, we are not our grandparents, we are not our ancestors. We are about that action. We will do what we have to do. We have that Malcolm X mentality of by any means necessary. And they should have been taken more seriously at home, and they should have been taken more seriously in their community when they were saying things like that. Because as we can see with the rioting and the looting that's been taking place in cities all over the country, they weren't playing and they weren't joking around when they said that. They really are about that action, and they are fed up, and rightfully so that they are fed up with everything that is going on now, everything that has taken place, and everything that has been put up with. Before I go any further, what are your thoughts on anything that I've just said? I mean, have you heard from millennials and Generation Z kids throughout your community, where you are, people maybe even in your family, that they tend to just seem to be a little more rebellious than those before them? Have you sensed that at any point before all of this took place?
No, not really. My family's pretty subdued. They don't say a lot. But let me ask you a question. You ever heard of Rosa Parks?
Yes, I have.
Well, good. Consider her part of everything, all the sacrifices that were made, that she ended up back in my hometown of Detroit. They got Rosa Parks Boulevard, and they have all kinds of different ways. And as you all know, like Atlanta, Detroit's a predominantly African-American area as well. And, I remember both of them are really big. One of the things I had the great pleasure to do many years ago was I saw the Dr. Martin Luther King Center, and that's a bucket list item for those people that haven't done it. I'd like to take my wife Candy there at some point so that she can respect everything that Dr. King and his wife, I think they're both, as I understand, buried next to each other or laid to rest in the same area, but that's something people have to do. But Rosa Parks is a lot of what took place during those very difficult times, and I think people have to do. But to answer your question, no, I mean, I don't talk to my family or a lot of the people around about this issue. I think that, not because they have anything bad to say, it's just all my family lives in Detroit, and I'm the only one basically right now in Florida. So, we're focused on my mother's health right now, who is terminal because of COPD. I mean, that to me is dominating my mind family-wise. So I'm not trying to dodge your question, but it's not like I don't see anything that's going on in the southern Florida area. And I see protests. The protests are necessary. We're trying to send a message. I told you, Xavier, this is a volcano that has erupted, okay? This is what we did. And when I go ahead and tell you, this is a volcano that has erupted, okay? That's what it's done. So... But, again, I keep a lot of my feelings to myself. I've spent time, though, over the last couple of weeks just going ahead and doing 6 broadcasts on this because it is important, and we finally need to go ahead and address it once and for all. I don't care what any politician says, whether it's the current president or the one that follows. I'm not going there. But at some point, this must be dealt with in such a manner. And it will.
And I'd like to touch on him really quickly because I don't really touch on politics. I don't normally touch on our current president. I haven't really spoken big on politics since I graduated from college and started to professionally work in the media industry, just out of respect of ethics and what the media code is all about. But I think we all can come to an agreement on the fact that the man that is currently the commander-in-chief of this country is not fit to be the commander-in-chief of this country.
Right. No debate.
That's one thing I believe that we can all come into agreement on.
Yeah, no debate there. Okay, that's all I'll say about it.
And when he tweeted out a statement that ended with, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts," he really kind of ignited all of this stuff that has been taking place in other cities, not named Minneapolis, Minnesota, because when this video of George Floyd's murder went viral, and Steven Jackson, the former NBA player who was friends with George Floyd, said George Floyd was like a brother to him. As a matter of fact, referred to him as twin because they looked so much alike. As he said, Minneapolis had no choice but to respond the way they did. Scott, you remember when Rodney King's incident took place in L.A.? He didn't die, but he did deal with a form of police brutality. You remember seeing the videos. You remember how crazy it was in L.A. during that time, to the point to where things didn't actually simmer down until Rodney King came out in a very cheerful video and said, "Can't we all just get along?"
Oh, yeah. Remember all too well. I also remember that Los Angeles area per se, O.J. Simpson, ended up being non-guilty over a crime that he committed, that we all know he committed against Ronald Goldman and Nicole Brown. And you can tell that city, there was some unrest about what took place there. So, again, L.A. is known for, being on a much larger scale with situations along these lines. I should point out to you that Mel Farr, one of our regular guests on the broadcast, told me that every time he goes to a gas station when he was living in L.A., the perception of an African-American man and a white person at a gas station, you tend to, when you get pulled over, they think the worst of you. You're already guilty before you're innocent, and the perception there is unbelievable. Had you have talked to him then, he would have given you the full story, but he gave us a story. So there's definitely an apprehension level when you deal with the color boundaries. I can tell you right now that I remember many years ago in Detroit, I got ticketed for something so stupid with one-arm driving, and when there was an African-American police officer and my girlfriend, and I was just acknowledging him, to let him know he's doing a good job. He pulled me over for a stupid ticket. Why am I bringing this up? Because that boundary has been there for a lot of years, whether it's white versus black or black versus white. It's always going to be there, and that's what needs to be shaken here, Xavier. It really does. But obviously we know African Americans have been disrespected, like Rodney Dangerfield, and that's why they end up getting the wrong end of the deal, and now you see where we're at the moment.
Oh, yes, I'm in total agreement with you right there. And, I'd actually like to bring something to your attention. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but it's something that has circulated on social media as well. There is a meme, and it's a picture of 5 different types of dogs that are 5 different colors. And the caption is, "We are all the same animal. Racism is stupid." And that really that really just kind of sums up this whole thing for me right now, because it's like, you don't discriminate against black dogs. You don't discriminate against white dogs. You don't discriminate against all color dogs. I've never heard of anybody discriminating against a dog because of their color. You either love dogs as a whole or you don't. I mean that's pretty much my understanding of that. And it really pretty much sums up that, yes, racism is indeed stupid. But besides it being stupid, it's also wrong. And it's been wrong for the better part of 400 years now. And before I go any further, speaking about the George Floyd murder, and also speaking about some of the notable sports figures that we are going to talk about, one in particular that you brought up off the cameras, Scott, is the Sacramento Kings announcer who was dismissed from his duties. We're going to speak on him as well. Right. I'd like to bring up the shooting of Breonna Taylor. And the reason I'd like to bring that up is because we're talking about the unarmed killing of black men, but I'd like everybody to understand something right now, and this goes for black people out there too. It's not just black men that are being targeted. It's black people in general. It's black men, it's black women, it's black children, it's black people in general. So, yes, I appreciate everyone coming out and saying we must protect black men at all costs. We love our black men. We love our black. I appreciate that. I really do. But we need to also understand that it's not just the black men that are being targeted. And that leads me into speaking about the shooting and the murder of Breonna Taylor that took place in Louisville, Kentucky in March earlier this year, where 3 Louisville Metro Police Department officers executed a no-knock search warrant. And they entered her apartment in Louisville, and they fired off their guns, and they killed her while she was asleep. And they had no reason to even be there. She was not the person that they were looking for. They were trying to execute a search warrant, and it was in her residence because it was suspected that drugs were being received in the case, and that a car had been registered that Breonna Taylor had been seen parked on several occasions in front of someone else's home. However, no drugs were found in the apartment, and as I said, this was not even the suspect that they were looking for. And, of course, I have my feelings about that too. But the thing I want to know is who in God's name came up with the concept of a no-knock search warrant. And Scott, before you go any further with this, I would like to know that I would like everyone to know that I am aware of the Breonna Taylor law that was put in place yesterday in Louisville, and we're going to speak on that. But a no-knock search warrant, do we even have an explanation for that? Because I know I don't.
Well, I graduated from the University of South Florida. It's a very accredited university. I'm proud of it. I don't know if anybody ever have a Harvard education could figure it out, or no matter what alma mater you go to. Nobody has an explanation for that. That's outright disgusting. How many times am I going to use the word disgusting in this broadcast? Probably a lot, right? I would. Yeah, there's no rhyme and reason for it. That was stupid. Why those guys in there? So that leads me to my next point, okay, Xavier. I'm going to go ahead and bring up 2 terms, okay, that should be utilized unilaterally with the individual that killed George Floyd. Okay, first of all, do you believe in capital punishment / the death penalty?
Yes, I do. And the reason that I believe in those things is because of what has happened to black people and other people in the past for crimes that they did not even commit. They were killed. Right. They were killed in the past for crimes that they haven't even committed. And we still have those things that take place today as well. We just don't hear about them as much.
I'll tell you what. I don't care what anybody says. I've always been a firm believer that the death penalty should be in all 50 states. I don't like these life in prisons type of thing because all they do is cost the taxpayers money is what they do. The problem with the death penalty, though, sometimes you wonder whether or not you can execute a person who didn't commit the crime and then they're let out after 30 to 40 years. But you know the ones that you really should be executing anyways. I realize that. But you know what? If somebody's going to die, you should kill one head for another. I don't care. Doesn't make any difference to me. And we know the ones that should be put to death anyways. I realize that this is a controversial topic, and I frankly don't cotton pick and care. It doesn't matter. You know, and we could go on and have a broadcast on this, and maybe one of these days, Xavier, on the Real and the Rare, we might exactly do that. But for the moment right now, that man in Minnesota, okay, the lead guy that kneeled on George Floyd deserves the death penalty.
No, I'm with you 100% in agreement. As a matter of fact, Scott, I'd like to share a story with you because you and I don't differ on this at all. I believe that anybody from any walk of life, any nationality, any ethnicity, if you purposely kill someone, you deserve to be killed yourself. Point blank, period. That's just how I feel about that. And the story I'd like to share with you is when I was in college, during my junior year at Savannah State University, I was teamed up on a partner's project with someone for a presentation for one of my classes. I can't remember the class that it was off the top of my head, so excuse me for that right now.
That's all right.
But our topic was actually capital punishment and the death penalty. And my partner and I actually differed on this. And we're doing this in front of our class during our presentation, and I began it off, and I said, yes, I do believe that the death penalty should still be in all 50 states, and I do believe it should be enacted, and I believe that anyone that purposely decides to take the life of someone else, especially unprovokingly, they should have to deal with the consequences of this. And the consequences of that would be to enact the death penalty. You purposely took someone else out of here, okay, you get taken out of here too. Well, that wasn't a very popular stance with my partner, and it wasn't a very popular stance with my class either, because they wanted to make the argument, well, you know, no one deserves to die and everyone deserves a second chance. And I simply posed a question to my partner and everyone else in that class, and it was silent for the remainder of our presentation. As a matter of fact, we were done with the presentation when I posed that point. I said, you know, you say that now, but if that were you, or if that were one of your friends, your family members, or your loved ones that had suffered at the hands of somebody else, or because of the actions of somebody else, who just decided they wanted to kill them just for the sake of killing them, would you still feel the same way? And there was absolutely no response from that class. There was absolutely no other response from my partner that I had on this project, because, of course, I already knew what the answer to that question was going to be from them. It was going to go, well, of course not. I know that's my family, that's my loved one. And, you know, that's something that we as people, not saying you and I, but I'm saying people in general, we have to get out of this concept of, I don't necessarily care too much about something until it is directly affecting me. We have to get out of that mindset, because it could easily be you on any given day. It could easily be someone that you love and that you cherish and that you care about on any given day. But also just simply for the fact that we are all human. We are all the same, and no one deserves to die, especially unprovokingly. I mean, I understand that accidents happen, and I don't want to get in too far into detail with accidents per se, because, I mean, sometimes you have incidents where kids may find a gun, and they may be playing around with the gun, and somebody ends up fatally shooting somebody.
Right.
That's not something that that person meant to do. That's not something that that person meant to happen. And no, I'm not saying those types of people should suffer at the hands of the death penalty. But someone who unprovokingly does something like the way that Derek Chauvin did it, oh no, you gotta go. There's no need for you in society at all.
Right.
Forget just being behind bars. No, there's no use for you here. And that's just how I feel about it.
Well,
and I'll just reiterate what you said, Scott. Anybody that has a problem with me saying that, tough nubs. I don't care.
Anybody that has a problem with what you're saying needs their head examined, number one. Number two, what will happen in Minneapolis, okay, is Derek Chauvin will be killed by the inmates, period. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I live in a community that was heavily affected by the tragedy that occurred a few years ago on Valentine's Day pertaining to that school shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Now, I'm not going to get into specific names, but we know who the killer was. And if there's a guy that ever deserves a death penalty, this guy is it. Period. And he will get
Without
it.
Question.
And Florida has
Without
a death
question.
penalty. So, you know, we're talking, I'm not going to get into massive school shootings, but I'm only talking about my point in terms of the death penalty. He'll get it. I don't know if the guy in South Carolina was killed yet, but it's just a matter of time. But the main thing is Derek Chauvin's going to get killed by the inmates. So whether Minnesota has it or not, it don't matter. It'll be done internally. Any more or less than Jeffrey Dahmer was killed out in the Milwaukee area, the inmates took care of business there. So, you know, for those individuals that think these guys are going to be serving all that time, not going to happen. But the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas tragedy in Parkland, Florida, to me, should never have happened. And believe me, justice will be served one way or the other. It will. If this kid doesn't die with the rest of his inmates, let me tell you, the state will get him, and they'll get him soon. I'm not sure exactly when the trial is, but I would encourage you, Xavier, to go ahead and do a little homework on Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. This is something that's eventually going to happen. I think COVID-19 is pushing everything back in the court system, so this one will be put off for a little while, but it's inevitable that what will happen at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas will definitely, justice will be served there. But Chauvin, don't worry, he'll get his due. And I have a feeling the rest of those other three guys will as well by the inmates. What happened there was just absolutely police brutality. We're seeing it all over the country. But now, as I said before, this was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yes, for sure. It definitely was. And now I'd like to speak on the legislation that was passed on yesterday in Louisville, Kentucky, where the Breonna Taylor law was passed, where the Louisville, Kentucky Metro Council voted unanimously to ban no-knock warrants. And I guess I should be screaming hallelujah for that, but it never should have even been in place in the first place. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm glad that it's now banned, but it's something that never should have been in place. That's just how I feel about that.
Well, glad something came out of it. Too bad you can't get Breonna Taylor's life back. I hate to use an analogy that former Louisville... definitely.
And see, Scott, I'm glad you're saying that because I don't necessarily like to use the term that we're going to get justice for what happened to these people. How can you get justice for someone when you can't bring their life back? And this is one of the reasons why I didn't come out here and make any statements or make any noise about any riots or any looting that was taking place. People being upset that fires were taking place, that buildings were being vandalized and torn down and knocked into. And I'm just like, fires can be put out. Buildings can be rebuilt. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many countless others, they can't be given their lives back.
Right. Well, here, I'll take an analogy, ironically, with the city that you mentioned, that former Louisville coach Rick Pitino, okay, ironically, when he was at the Boston Celtics, said Kevin McHale isn't going back through that door. Larry Bird isn't going back through that door. Well, guess what, folks? The irony in Louisville is Breonna Taylor is not coming back in that door. So what do you have? Sure, you have legislation, but the poor young lady didn't have an opportunity to go ahead and see her dreams potential because of a corrupt situation.
And last Friday, and it should be noted that last Friday would have been her 27th birthday. So it's just a very sad time all the way around. And to the parents and the families that are dealing with this, and they're coming out and they're speaking on it, I would really like to also take this time, Scott, to just applaud their strength and applaud their courage of everything they've been through, because we know that they're still battling battles that we know run deeper than just the expressions that we see on their faces and the words that come out of their mouth. And no matter how much strength they show, we know that there is a pain in their heart and their soul that will never be able to be taken away.
Well, what you brought up here, you made both of our points. You did. I mean, again, but we're talking about Breonna Taylor. Okay, how many other incidents, even though these are the ones that have come to the forefront right now in our conversation night here on the Real and Rare? Just so you know, folks, the Real and the Rare is being heard on the WSAN network. So you can go ahead, and what we encourage you to do when the broadcast is out there for you is to download it and subscribe, because I'll tell you what, you're not going to digest everything on the first listen. What we're giving you tonight, we're giving you a handful to bite on, and I know that it's going to take a while to absorb everything that we're doing. We're all over the map, but it's necessary that we are all over the map on any subject, let alone this particular one. So continue on, Xavier.
So I'd also now like to move into some of the incidents that we have seen taking place, whether they're statements, whether they are financial contributions, or whether they are people that are being dismissed from positions because they are coming out and saying the opposite of what needs to be said right now. And before I go touch into that, I would simply like to address what Black Lives Matter is for those who still have failed to understand what the concept is, or maybe you don't want to understand it. I don't know. And I know I shouldn't have to do this, Scott, but I'm going to do it anyway just to put the point out there. When we say Black Lives Matter, we are not saying that Black lives are the only ones that matter. We understand that everyone's life matters. However, all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter too. So when we say Black lives matter, we are saying essentially that Black lives matter too. I just want to go ahead and point that out for anybody who still is dealing with this whole, well, I don't understand why they're just saying Black lives matter when it should be all lives matter. And I understand that some people are actually being facetious and, you know, they're coming off and they just don't even really want to understand what this is, and they flat out don't care what it is. That's you, that's your beliefs, and
right.
You have to answer to whoever you believe your maker is one day for right. What you have in your heart right there.
Well, we got to
like to touch on. Go ahead.
Yeah,
we
got to preface this point though for those individuals out there where we draw the fine line. I'm going to bring up Grant Napier while you're bringing that up. All lives do matter. I was just
about to bring him up.
Well, good. Well, we are anyways, okay? I'm glad. Great minds think alike, okay? All lives do matter. We can't lose sight of that. But Black lives definitely matter, okay? So the two statements could go hand in hand, and they should, because when it's all said and done, okay, both African Americans and Caucasians, when they're in the military fighting on the front lines, every life matters, whether it's white, black, or whatever, because we're teammates when they're fighting these battles in all these wars. So unless you understand the fact that, yeah, you brought up facetious, all lives do matter, but we can't lose sight of the fact that Black lives do too. We are teammates, okay? We are one. You follow me? I hope people don't feel I'm offending anybody by making that statement, but we're collectively is what we are in this matter. Do you agree or disagree with what I just said?
No, I agree. I agree with what you're saying 100%, because as I said before you started speaking, we understand that all lives matter. However, what we are trying to get across, what we are reiterating, what we are standing on the front lines for right now is making sure that we point out that all lives as a whole cannot matter until Black lives matter too.
Well,
and
the key words there,
Black lives don't matter in the eyes of many. So I understand 100% what you're saying.
Yeah, the key words that you said, as a whole. So for anybody out there thinking as a whole, collectively, that's what this message is interpreted to be. Yeah, let me tell you what, okay, the way I bring on people, I don't care if you're white or you're African American. If you have a great work ethic and you have talent and you're a nice person, you're always welcome as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't make a difference what race you are, as far as I'm concerned. That's how I've always felt about it, you know. So, yeah, this is a complicated subject, and that's why we're talking about it. That's why every person with a podcast, a radio broadcast, a television broadcast, we're all talking about it. We're all bringing on different angles on how to approach it and how to convey our message. And this is no different than what anybody else does. You know, Grant Napier, let's go on to the former Sacramento Kings broadcaster, and I'll let you go ahead and begin with Grant Napier.
Yes, this all started in a Twitter exchange that he had with former Sacramento Kings star, who is now an NBA free agent, DeMarcus Cousins, who he asked him to comment on the Black Lives Matter movement in the wake of what had taken place in Minneapolis with the George Floyd murder. And DeMarcus Cousins simply tweeted at Grant Napier's show on Twitter, "What's your take on BLM?" And Grant Napier replied to him, "Hey, how are you? Thought you forgot about me. Haven't heard from you in years." And he prefaced his next comments by putting it all in capital letters. All lives matter, every single one, with 3 exclamation points. And as I said, I understand 100% what he's saying there, because I'm in agreement with it. I'm in agreement with the fact that all lives matter. However, I am someone who is still standing on the front lines of the Black Lives Matter movement as well right now, because I understand what that's about. Now, let's speak on Mr. Napier. Just a few days later, he resigned because of those comments that he made regarding the Black Lives Matter movement. His statement officially said that Grant Napier has resigned from the Sacramento Kings We thank him for his contributions to the team and wish him all the best. And he said in a later statement, I want to thank the fans for their overwhelming love and support. I will always remain a part of Kings Nation in my heart. Now, did he actually resign? That part I'm not sure of, Scott, because I'm not sure if this is one of those cases where he voluntarily resigned or if he was given an option to resign or just be fired.
Well, he was fired from the radio station, Xavier. They got rid of him in a heartbeat. You do anything like that, call a racist sort of thing or a bad reference, you're going to get fired off the bat, no explanation. So the radio station moved on quickly. I think the Kings had to follow suit by making sure the PR mess was cleaned up. So, yeah, it remains to be seen whether he's forced to resign or he did on his own. But so my question to you, though, is even though everything was in capital letters, and Mel Farr on our broadcast, you know how him and we did talk about the statements where they go hand in hand about the whole thing. Was he ignorant about it or just didn't even know and misunderstood what it was? That's the thing. Do I think he's totally I don't know. I mean, that's subject to everybody's interpretation.
I don't know what actually was in his brain and his heart, but this is a time where you need to be able to read the room and be aware and understand everything that's going on right now. And when you come out with a statement like that, when you tweet something like that, it makes you look like you're not aware of what's going on, you're not reading the room, or you just don't care to read the room. I am not going to accuse him of not caring to want to read the room. I'm not going to call Grant Napier a racist. I don't know him. I've never met him. I've never heard anything about him along the lines of him being a racist. I don't know why DeMarcus Cousins even tweeted at him in the first place. We know that towards the end of DeMarcus Cousins' run in Sacramento, he had issues with the Kings organization. I don't know how many people in the organization he had issues with. I don't even know if Grant Napier was one of the people he had issues with.
From what I hear, was actually, now that you brought it up. Yeah, I think from what I've heard. So
he was someone that DeMarcus Cousins had issues
there's an agenda there. If you talk about players along with certain writers, you can develop a bad rap and then they don't want to be bothered with you. So, but then again, DeMarcus Cousins has had issues with everybody. So I wouldn't point out what happened in Sacramento. I mean, look at his track record. He can't stay any place. So who the heck is DeMarcus Cousins to be what I consider a reliable source? Now, with all due respect to Grant Napier, maybe the idea to use capital letters and exclamation points might have been a questionable decision on his part, which magnified and heated the problem. That I probably might have thought twice about doing. If they were in small letters with a period next to it instead of exclamation points, then do you interpret it a little different? Because when I had Mel Farr on, he thought that both statements, All Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter, were fair statements. But again, how you deliver it with exclamation points, capital letters, and all that to me, I'm not so sure that was a good idea.
No, it definitely was not a good idea for him to do that. And, you know, it's unfortunate that he had to lose his job for something like this, whether it's him not being aware, whether it's him not reading the room or whatever the issue of the case is. But, I mean, this is a time right now where you don't need to come out on the fence of anything right now. You're either with the movement or you're not. And that's just simply the time that we're living in right now. And with that being said, I'd like to ask you a little about your thoughts on everything that is now coming out about Dabo Swinney in the past recent weeks, especially in wake of an assistant coach on the staff reiterating the N-word around one of the former players that was on the team back in 2017. I want to note this again. He did not directly call that player the N-word. That player used the N-word towards another player on the team, and he was reiterating that word to him that we don't use it on the team. However, with that being said, it is never a time that is appropriate for that word to be used. You don't reiterate that word whether you're trying to make that point or not. And, you know, Scott, I'm not going to take the stand that some of the other black analysts have taken on TV in the past few days. I don't believe anybody should be allowed to use that word, quite honestly, black people included. I mean, that's just how I feel about that word. It is arguably the most heinous, harshest, ugliest word in the history of the English language. And it should just be banished from existence from all people. That's just how I feel about that. I do my best not to use that word around my friends. Sometimes that word may come up in discussions with us, but it doesn't come up very often because I understand the history of that word. I understand those who suffered because of that word. I understand those who were sacrificed because of that word. What are your thoughts on everything that we're hearing come out about Dabo Swinney and the fact that he will not directly issue a statement in support of Black Lives Matter?
Well, you got to remember, South Carolina is a state to begin with, which to me just took the Confederate flag down just a couple of years ago at the Capitol. So, it's a high Civil War area. As far as Dabo Swinney not making a statement, this incident happened 3 years ago. It wasn't directed at a player. It was a word that was used in the general sense of the word directed towards something. Okay, so you got to understand that if he called this particular player that word, then that was bad. But again, we're talking about something that happened 3 years ago, but now we're bringing it up. Okay, now as far as my feelings about the N-word, anybody that mentions that word should have a lighter and they should light their tongue on fire. Little graphic for my taste, yeah. But think about Jewish people. They don't like the word kike at all, but we don't talk about that, do we? There's some people that actually use the word tunker instead of the N-word, but yet that's offensive toward African Americans, is it? So, I'm not going to sit there and come down hard on Dabo Swinney in this situation because, again, we're talking about something that occurred 3 years ago. We don't have enough facts. That's why I don't want to go ahead and make a comment towards a guy who's done a tremendous job at the program. But if that had been used at a particular player by that coach, then you've got a problem. Then he's dealing with the university, and it's a PR nightmare. But I wouldn't classify South Carolina as a saint for a state either. Ironically, with that comment coming in, what do you think the state of South Carolina? Make sense?
Yes, it makes sense 100%. And for those who are not familiar with the history of South Carolina, or you're really not sure about that state, all you need to know, ladies and gentlemen, is that is the state where the Civil War initially kicked off, a war that was over slavery. This was a war that was fought over the Confederate states, the southern states, wanting to continue to practice the act of slavery, and which is that is why they seceded from the Union. This is why the Civil War took place as a whole, and it took place in Fort Sumter, South Carolina, where this whole thing initially kicked off. So even if you all didn't think you were going to necessarily get a huge history lesson tonight, there it is for you. There it is. We take care of many things here on The Real and the Rare. Now, I'd like to address my attention to another individual, someone who I believe shocked the world in the past week, Scott, and that would be Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Michael Jordan has pledged to donate, Michael Jordan and the Jordan brand have pledged to donate $100 million to the causes of Black Lives Matter over the next decade. So essentially, this is going to be $10 million per year for the next 10 years going towards causes and organizations that deal with Black Lives Matter. But the money is not the thing that got me, Scott. It was Michael's statement that he came out with that got me, because I've never heard Michael Jordan say things among this line before. He's always been one to try to protect his brand as much as he possibly can. But I guess in wake of all of the backlash that came after the Last Dance documentary series and Michael Jordan not standing up for the black politician in North Carolina when he was an active player in the league, and he could have done that. His mother wanted him to do that, but he didn't do it. And then you had people who were coming out and saying, well, since Mike wants to say that he doesn't get involved in politics, why did he go help campaign for Bill Bradley many years ago? He had a lot of fire that came his way for all of these things. And I'd also like to bring up something else before I read Michael Jordan's statement that he said. He said at Kobe Bryant's public memorial service at the Staples Center on February the 24th that Kobe's death has changed him forever. Now, is that part of the reason that Jordan came out with this statement? I don't want to say that it is, but for something like this to now be taking place and Michael Jordan doing the things that he's doing to try to help to the cause of this and try to help bring solutions and change to everything, it is a significant type of change as opposed to the Michael Jordan that we have seen in the past. Now, I'd like to take this time to read his statement when he was addressing the George Floyd murder that took place. He said, "I am deeply saddened, truly pained, and plain angry. I see and feel everyone's pain, outrage, and frustration. I stand with those who are calling out the ingrained racism and violence towards people of color in our country. We have had enough. We must listen to each other, show compassion and empathy, and never turn our backs on senseless brutality." Once again, Scott, that's not the Michael Jordan I know. I've never heard Michael Jordan come out and issue a statement like this. What are your thoughts after hearing something like that out of Michael Jordan's mouth?
I can go on with this one, and I'm going to go ahead and do exactly that. Number one, The Last Dance to me was an absolute embarrassment, okay, in terms of how it turned out. And Michael Jordan is trying to, I don't know if he had an image problem after that production, but he certainly took a hit with his reputation. So do I think to some extent he's trying to save face because of that embarrassment that blew up in his face? Maybe a little bit. He's certainly a high-profile individual. More power to him. I'm glad he's helping his own race out, for which he is a part of it. You know what I mean? So, hey, you know, anybody that lends their generosity towards a cause, I have the utmost respect for him. No problem, MJ. If you've got it in your pocket, you can't die with it anyways. You might as well be generous about it. And I respect you for that. But let's not lose sight of the fact that during The Last Dance, his image and reputation took a hit, and we all know it did, even with some of his old teammates. We both know. Maybe, I don't know in your eyes, but it did mine. I always loved Michael Jordan as a player, but some of the things that I saw during that course of that, I heard about those 10 episodes because I wouldn't watch the other 8, only 2. But more power to him that he can help out. It doesn't hurt his brand at all. You know, he's stepping up with his platform and doing what he feels is the right thing, and he should, and I'm glad that he is. But in terms of Michael Jordan per se, well, I don't know. You tell me. What do you think? Does this help his reputation, or do you think he's trying to save face for the embarrassment that he created?
I believe it's a little of both. I definitely believe he's trying to save just a little face here with some of the chaos that he caused in wake of this whole documentary series. And yes, I mean, you did mention the stir-ups that he caused with his teammates as well. Oh, yes, very much well informed on that as well. Craig Hodges, Horace Grant, Scottie Pippen, just to name a few. But, you know, I'm not going to come down on Michael Jordan the way that I've heard some other analysts come down on him and saying, well, he's 57 now. Would he have done this when he was 27, 37? I'm not going to focus on what was not done in the past because that has not changed. We always like to say in terms of sports, when we look at athletes, when we look at teams, and we look at the success of them, we always like to use the term, to quote the great Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately?
Right.
Well, this is what Michael is doing for us lately. And I'm not going to question him too much for it. I'm going to be thankful that he is doing this. I'm thankful for the money that's being donated, but I'm even more thankful for the fact that he came out with a statement of this magnitude. And it wasn't just a blanket statement. That is what I'm more thankful of than anything as opposed to the money. The money is wonderful, but the statement just holds more weight to me.
Well, to me, The Last Dance was, I'll give you one word, was an absolute embarrassment, period. But yeah, if his generosity leads towards change, and he's more power to him. I'm not going to criticize Michael Jordan. I loved him as a player. I love the intensity that he brought to the table. He won, 6 championships? Can't blame that. Of course, he had a lot of help doing it, okay? But he's in a position where he can give. Why not? Why not? Will he ever win a championship as an owner? Don't hold your breath. I don't think you will.
And yes, I'm with you 100% on all of that. And another thing I want to say is, let's stop taking this line of this is Michael Jordan also now trying to compete with the fact that others like LeBron James have always been spoken out on social justice issues. I don't believe that's fair to bring that up right now in wake of everything that is going on, and especially the severity of everything. I don't believe that this necessarily has to do with a competition with LeBron James of any sorts. Is he somewhat trying to save face from what happened in The Last Dance? Of course he is. Just to a small degree, I'm going to say that he is, because there was a lot of venom and backlash that came his way, and deservedly so, for the things that he did in the past. However, I am somebody who does believe in what have you done for me lately. And this statement and this generosity with the $100 million over the next 10 years, Michael's okay with me for right now.
Well, I think he would have been generous about this 20 years ago. I have no doubt about it. Okay, but my question to you is this. Is this a PR move by Michael Jordan, Xavier?
That's something I just don't have the answer to, Scott. I don't have the answer to that 100%. And I don't want to come out and make an allegation or an accusation against someone just because of how serious this is.
Well, I'm not either. I'm just asking a question. Is it a PR move? I don't have the answer for it either, so don't feel too bad. You don't have one. I don't, but don't think there won't be a lot of people that come to the conclusion that maybe it is a PR move. But again, generosity is okay. Okay, there's a lot of people, even during COVID-19, that are donating money, and there's been a lot of positive that has come out of COVID-19, that we're seeing the good out of people, with people giving back. You know what I mean? That's okay. But again, there's no question that he's certainly trying to step up financially, and he has the resources to do it. He does. I had a guest on earlier in the week over at the Big Rock fishing tournament out there, and I think he made a little bit of money catching a blue marlin out there. But that's only probably a fraction of what he's going to do anyhow. And he's made himself visible over at the Big Rock tournament out in North Carolina. So he tries to get out. I think overall Michael Jordan is a fine person. His legacy will always be a great legacy. Sometimes he's a little rough around the edges, maybe. But, yeah, more power to him generosity-wise. I still think there might be a PR move involved. To what extent, I don't know. That's hard to tell.
And I'd also like to take this time up to bring up that another celebrity who, surprisingly in the eyes of many, has opened up their pockets to this cause, and also to the families of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, who have to deal with these horrendous murders that have taken place, is Kanye West. Kanye West reportedly pledged $2 million to each of the families of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. And he has also set up a college fund for Gianna Floyd, that is George Floyd's 6-year-old daughter. And he is someone else who has come out and said and done many controversial things throughout the course of the past decade that many people do not agree with. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, Scott, but I'll just go ahead and tell you straight up. Kanye West hasn't been very popular with a great deal of the black community for the course of the last 8 years for many of the things that he said. In particular, coming out and saying that slavery was a choice, and also coming out and wearing a Make America Great Again hat on several occasions. But I'm not going to condemn him on a matter like this. I'm not going to say what he's doing is a PR move either. I don't know what's in any of these people's hearts, but this was a very generous thing for him to do. It was a very generous thing for Michael Jordan to do. Other celebrities who have been noted to be opening up their wallets right now, Angelina Jolie and Chrissy Teigen, just donating to the families and also donating to various Black Lives Matter charities. So I'll simply just take this time to just say thank you, and I'll just leave it at that.
Well, it's a PR move, but don't lose sight of the fact it's a good tax write-off, too. I mean, come on, we're talking business, right? I mean, it's a great PR move on the surface, but it's a tax write-off. It's, Uncle Sam will pay him part of it, but that's not why they're doing it, for the tax write-off by any stretch. But, again, we're talking about Steven Jackson. You brought him up earlier in the broadcast. I know he'll be a good support person for George Floyd's family. And more power to him. Steven Jackson, obviously, we know, is known for his involvement in the Malice in the Palace. But, a lot of these guys have tremendous hearts. You really do. And we're seeing a lot of that, too, come to the forefront. We know Floyd's funeral got paid for. Was it Floyd Mayweather that paid for that funeral?
Yes.
So
yes, he paid for all three of the funerals that took place. And I'll say thank you to him, and thank you to everybody who is just helping with this cause right now, especially if you have it financially to give. Thank you for the donations, and I'll just leave it at that. As far as this part of this conversation goes,
well, 88,500
thank you to everyone.
Yeah, 88,500. But I think the one headline, I don't know if we're going to get to it, but we will talk about it tonight, is what occurred with the good old boys this week. What about Bubba Wallace? Anybody heard about him? Drives for Richard Petty, okay, the King, number 43 car. Boy, I'll tell you what, Richard Petty and Bubba Wallace already talking about a contract extension anyways, because he's been a pretty good driver, finished second in the 2018 Daytona 500, but this has been a big week for Bubba Wallace. The Confederate flag has been taken down at all events, and NASCAR stepped it up. So let's talk about that, because I have another thing I want to talk about pertaining to the Confederate flag and what's occurred with the good old boys. What are your thoughts about the work of Bubba Wallace, who, by the way, finished 11th in Martinsville on Wednesday night?
I applaud him, and I thank him. I thank him for all of the measures that he has taken to help this get put on track, and we know what the Confederate flag represents. No matter how some people want to spin this, we know what that flag represents, and NASCAR is definitely doing the right thing here, despite the fact that one of the drivers has already come out and said that he will be ending his relationship with NASCAR after the 2020 season is over with. I believe his name is Ryan Ciccarelli. I apologize if I am not announcing that correctly, but he announced on yesterday that he would be quitting NASCAR after the Confederate flag ban, and I would like to just read off a little of something that he said. He said that the presence of the, here's his statement. Well, NASCAR came out with a statement about the Confederate flag, and I'd like to read that off first.
Sure.
And that is that the presence of the Confederate flag at NASCAR events runs contrary to our commitment to providing a welcoming and inclusive environment for all our fans, our competitors, and our industry. Bringing people together around a love for racing and the community that it creates is what makes our fans in sports special. The display of the Confederate flag will be prohibited from all NASCAR events and property. That was the statement that was read off by NASCAR.
Okay.
Now,
well, let me point out one thing, that two words that have been predominant throughout our broadcast about the guy that's leaving in 2020. Good riddance. Continue.
And this is what Ryan Ciccarelli posted on Facebook. And it should be noted that he was ridiculed very heavily on social media for his stance on this. He said, well, it's been a fun ride and dream come true, but if this is the direction NASCAR is headed, we will not participate after the 2020 season is over. I don't believe in kneeling during the anthem, nor taking people right to fly whatever flag they love. And this is the way he wrote it, folks. I mean, he left some words out. I'm just reiterating what he said. I could care less about the Confederate flag, but there are people that do, and it doesn't make them a racist. All you are doing is effing with one group to cater to another, and I ain't spent the money. We are to participate in any political BS, so everything is for sale. That is the statement that Ryan Ciccarelli made on Facebook after NASCAR officially has decided to take the Confederate flag and ban it from all of their events. What are your thoughts, Scott?
Well, I hope he opens up an excavating company, because he just gave up his motorsports career. That's what he wants to do. That's what he believes in. More power to him. But in my opinion, good riddance. That's all I can tell you. And I know we keep talking about South Carolina a lot. We're talking about a state that, finally took the Confederate flag down from the Capitol. But for many, many years, they weren't allowed to host championship events until they finally acknowledged, take this thing down. And then they indeed, a couple of years ago, had an opportunity to coach to host a men's the NCAA tournament over at the University of South Carolina. So this state has a very bad track record anyways for what they're doing. So that's just part of the whole South Carolina dynamic of what everything has happened in terms of the Black Lives Matter. It's just one aspect of it, and we know there's a lot of layers in this whole thing, but good riddance to the guy. So be it. I don't know what he's going to do for a living. Maybe he doesn't care. I don't know. But obviously he doesn't feel. Maybe he'll go ahead and drive. Maybe his speed rush will be to drive mopeds around a dirt track someplace all the way out in oblivion. I don't know. But who cares? There's a lot of other people that feel good about it. So you have one bad egg, so be it.
Yes, and I agree with your statement 100%. Good riddance to him. I'm not familiar with who this guy is. I'm also not very familiar, and I don't really follow NASCAR heavily anyway. Their initial stance and them waving the Confederate flag at events had nothing to do with that for me. I've just never been able to get into the sport.
Well,
that's just simply the reason I haven't been able to follow it. It's something I've just struggled to be able to get into.
Well, we'll be doing a lot more motorsports on the network, and I've always loved motor racing, but it doesn't hurt the fact that I'm from Metro Detroit. I grew up with MIS as well, and then ended up going ahead and working out in Phoenix, and I've worked auto racing for a lot of years. And I've done the Homestead race, which ironically is this Sunday here in the area. But I will tell you this. I had a radio show many years ago, Xavier, out in Phoenix called Weekly Wheels. And obviously, it was a motor racing sport. I think what Bubba Wallace has done this week is phenomenal. It really has. But the biggest thing that will convince me that NASCAR is truly believes in what they're doing right now is there must be more African-American drivers to convince me that this is a complete effort. They're doing all the right things in terms of making sure that they support Black Lives Matter. More power to them. In fact, when I was on the air, a lot of my co-hosts got very nervous when I addressed this subject on what we call now terrestrial radio. They said from now on, if you do anything, just let us know ahead of time. They thought we were going to get kicked off the air by the FCC. But no, I made sure I had done enough research on the subject. We had a call in at that time that backed what I had to say, and to say that that they were breathing a sigh of relief after the broadcast would be mildly understating the obvious. So I think that for me to be completely convinced that NASCAR is all in, I know they have a Drive for Diversity program, but we need to see a lot more African-American drivers in the sport. Now, I know that Walter Payton was looking into it for a while. Magic Johnson's been talking about it. But until I see more visual African-American drivers in the sport, I'll be a complete believer in what they believe in for diversity when it's more visual and they're drivers. But now, bear in mind, that of all the sports that get involved, and Mel Farr mentioned this yesterday in the broadcast for the Sports Exchange, let's not kid yourself. NASCAR is an expensive sport to get involved. It really is. It's not like basketball where you go to the store, you buy a ball, and you buy a pair of sneakers, gym shoes, and you can play the sport. But I still have to believe that there has to be a way to see more drivers until I'm fully sold on the idea. But they're making a lot of incredible steps. NASCAR's made a lot of the right moves. They really have, in terms of getting their sport back a lot faster than most. So in my opinion, NASCAR, to me, gets a B+. They'll get an A1 all the way around when we see more African-American drivers. And I'll tell you what, I hope Bubba Wallace turns out to be the role model that will inspire African-Americans to get involved. I know I definitely
hope that he is, too, because before this week took place, I didn't even know who Bubba Wallace was. Like I told you, I don't follow NASCAR. I'm not really a big fan of it. I've never been to a NASCAR event. Maybe if I were to attend a NASCAR event and actually see the action happening live up close, maybe it would intrigue me more as opposed to just watching it on TV, because it doesn't help me grasp the full concept of it. But I'm very happy and I'm very proud for what Bubba Wallace has accomplished this week. And my hat is also off to NASCAR for what they have done with banning the Confederate flag. And as you said, the next step is making sure that we now find a way to include more black drivers into NASCAR. Well, that's the next step that we take with this.
First of all, Bubba Wallace was on Golick and Wingo this week, and he was on the Today Show, and I'm sure he had a lot of other public appearances that I don't know about. Those are the two I'm most familiar with. But yeah, NASCAR is a good sport. If you can get into it, more power to you. Who knows? You might be working in a market where you're able to be around it. I know you're from the Georgia area, so they have a couple of races a year at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. I think that's out in I'm trying to remember what city it is, but it's in the greater Atlanta area. I would love to get out there. And I cover IMSA, so I love motorsports. I realize the team effect of what those guys do when they put their lives on the line week in and week out to be prepared. So, and again, I love the sport. You talk about team work in every sense of the word. What these guys do week in and week out to entertain. It's a sport that if you can get into, you try to do it. It's more than just a bunch of guys driving around a road course or an oval. Okay, you have to understand the drivers. You have to understand the mechanics. You have to understand the pit crews, the owners. There's so many different layers to this thing that I wish more people would get involved, for sure. And Bubba Wallace, to me, I hope I will be a fan of his forever. And I had the great opportunity many years ago to interview and write a story on Richard Petty, and I'm glad that Petty is associated with Wallace. But we need to see more of these.
And I'm in 100% agreement with you under there. And I'd like to transition now to the NFL, because there was a group of NFL players last week. I don't want to start naming off names because I may forget someone, but one of the notable faces there was current Super Bowl MVP Patrick Mahomes, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr. Those are all the names I remember right now. They had a group Zoom call where they called out the NFL and demanded that the NFL apologize for not speaking up about social injustices and condemning players that were coming out and speaking about social injustices. And just about 24 hours later, Roger Goodell came out on video with a statement saying that he apologized on behalf of the NFL for condemning players for speaking out about social injustices, racial injustices, and police brutality. And, I'm glad that Roger Goodell came out with that statement. But my question to you, Scott, is did you have an issue with the fact that the name that I believe everybody was looking for in particular to receive an apology, Colin Kaepernick, do you have an issue with the fact that he did not issue an apology to him, considering the fact that he was the face of bringing light to these issues most recently in the NFL?
Yeah, to some extent I do, but you have to also understand there was a collusion lawsuit, so I don't know whether he was actually allowed to bring it up or should bring it up. So there's probably a legal aspect that maybe that we're not sure about. You follow me? But yeah, to some extent I wish he probably did, but there's probably more to that one than meets the eye. I mean, Colin Kaepernick, now that you brought him up, do you think that he's going to have a job in the NFL this year?
I believe that he will at least be given a fair tryout to have a job in the NFL this year. It's very hard for me to say that he's going to be given a job in the NFL because I don't know if this is going to just be based off of fairness, the right thing, or based off of his skill set. I don't know what his skill set looks like anymore. I can't go just based off of what he did in a tryout last year after he altered the tryout that was set up for him.
That was bad.
I can't go based off of that.
Right.
I can't go based off of that. And he hasn't played in the NFL since 2016. And this isn't like when Muhammad Ali had to give up 3 to 4 years of his prime for not fighting in Vietnam before having his boxing license reinstated because the sport ever desperately needed him back that bad.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going to happen with Colin Kaepernick. I don't know. I would like to see him get another tryout. I would like to see him get another shot with the NFL. And I would at least like to see him on somebody's roster in some capacity. But as far as if it's going to happen, I don't know.
That was bad, altering the tryout. Now, I don't know whether the NFL was trying to do it to save face again or not, but that was bad. Don't change the site of the tryout when everybody was about to look at you. That only made things worse, and then people wondered. There were just too many questions around that. But do I believe that if his skill set is what it is, he's hungry to get back and play in the NFL now that he feels that the first step is made toward it. So I believe that he's as good as a lot of the quarterbacks who are out in the NFL. So he should get an opportunity. And I have a feeling as this thing plays out over the next couple of weeks, bear in mind, okay, this is what, June the 12th. Okay, so training camps aren't due to open up until the end of July, from what I've heard. Of course, why do I get my Junes and my Januaries mixed up? I don't know, because you have a couple of J's here, but this is June the 12th. So you've got another 6-7 weeks for maybe a team or two to get interested. But again, this is something that can play out. So I hope he does get an opportunity for sure. And why not? I mean, you do need two good quarterbacks to be at least a contender, and do I think he's as good? My gut feeling is somehow, some way, I think he's going to get an opportunity somewhere. I don't know what situation would be suitable, but there's a lot of TBDs here to be determined. But I think he's as good as, if not better, than what's out there. I do.
Yes, I definitely agree with you on that. Because we've seen other quarterbacks being given backup positions who we know they didn't belong in the NFL. Let's just stop beating around the bush and let's stop sugarcoating that, ladies and gentlemen. We know that some of those quarterbacks, some of them had not played for 6 or 7 years at that point in the NFL, and they were being given tryouts and backup jobs over someone who had most recently played a year or two removed. Okay, but we understand that. I do believe he could come in and compete for a backup job right now. Could he compete for a starter's job? I can't give an answer for that right now. We would actually have to see that happening to say that, but I definitely wish him all the best, and I hope that the NFL does the right thing here and does at least offer him the opportunity to end up on someone's roster for the 2020 season, just to do right by him and what he was taking a knee for.
Oh, I think they will. I mean, come on. Jameis Winston's a backup quarterback, okay? My gut feeling is Cam Newton's going to be a backup somewhere. He hasn't been signed anywhere yet. Cam is just waiting for somebody to get injured and see where he fits in. But, yeah, I mean, for crying out loud, Jameis Winston is a backup quarterback. Colin Kaepernick, without a doubt, backup at the beginning. But he needs a little time to get the rust out. But I think he's a great athletic quarterback. Remember, during those 4 years, he hadn't taken any hits either. So his body's probably in the best condition. It just takes a little while to get reacclimated to being with the contact drills a little bit. So I don't think there's any doubt they come in and compete. But, yeah, back up. But I think he'd be content with that for a little while. Again, everything in any nature type of sports, Xavier, it all comes down to the right situation. It really does. Who could use them? To me, honestly, it's anybody's guess. Pete Carroll keeps talking about good things about him, but yet you can't tell me that Colin Kaepernick isn't an upgrade over Geno Smith. Really? Come on, Pete. You keep talking about the guy. You keep telling people that you regret that you didn't sign him in 2017. Well, come on, Pete. Get off of it and bring him on board if you feel that good about him instead of making your public persona look good. If Colin Kaepernick deserves a job, give it to him.
Because I'm glad you said something about that, because I'm really getting tired of the statement that he's come out with in the past few days. Well, back in 2017, I really wanted to sign him, and I regret not doing it. But you still have an opportunity to do that now.
Come on, Xavier. Geno Smith? Really? Come on. I don't get this loud on the air. Geno Smith over Colin Kaepernick? Really? I'm not knocking you.
I'm
just
definitely
saying.
taking Colin Kaepernick over him any day.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Come on, Pete. Really? Maybe you need to go over to Port Townsend, Washington, across Seattle, okay, and hibernate in some garage. Okay, and I'm not knocking Port Townsend. My cousin Cindy used to live there, a beautiful area. But you're talking about, the Pacific Northwest. You can't sit here and tell me Geno Smith over Colin Kaepernick. Really? I don't buy it. But we'll find out to the end of July 31 whether or not Pete needs to kind of rethink his position. You keep giving all this information about who's interested. Maybe you're the one interested, but you're not ready to come out yet until you see how this all clears. I don't know. And again, my passion about this subject, the way we brought this thing up. Geno Smith, really? How many times has he had opportunities to land somewhere else? Over Colin Kaepernick? Okay?
It's been too many. It's been far too many.
Yeah. Come on, Pete. Just sign the guy if you really feel that good about him.
And with that being said, I want to start to draw this conversation to a close for now. But I'd like to simply close it out by simply saying this. I'm encouraged with all of the peaceful protesting we're seeing. I'm encouraged with all of the outrage we're seeing. I'm encouraged by the unity of people from all walks of life that we are seeing that want to bring change to this issue. However, with that being said, for us to continue to really help bring change to these issues, we have to get out there and vote. I'm not telling you who to vote for. Whoever your party is, whoever your candidate is who it is. But for real change to start happening, we have to vote. We have to start voting not only on the national level, it has to start on the local level where those laws are put in place. Folks, we got to get out there and we have to start voting. I know that there is a portion of people out there who feel that voting doesn't matter and it really doesn't make a difference. It does. And now is the time for you to use your voice. If you are able to go out there and participate in these primaries where they are taking place in your area, go out there and do your part, do your civic duty, and go out there and vote.
What?
And to those who are still with us in this fight of injustice, I just want to continue to say thank you, but I also want to make sure that everybody understands this point. This is not going to be some overnight change. This is going to take time, and we're going to have to stick with this. And I don't want to see people get tired and get weary and say that I don't see things happening immediately, so what's the point? It's going to take time, folks.
I will go on record on this broadcast tonight and tell you and everybody listening out there that the last time that I voted in a presidential election, is when Ross Perot was there, and I voted for Ross Perot. Why have I been idle all this time? Because I didn't like who was out there. I couldn't sleep at night if I went either way. But I'll tell you what, I am this year. And I feel that the reason I'm doing it goes beyond this situation, but it's been building up as I collect information and I start to develop opinions about the way the country's currently being run. Does that mean that you know who I'm going to vote? No, not really. But I know my mind and my heart are on the same page about going out there and doing it this year. I don't regret not voting and being idle for a while because, yes, you have to go with your gut feeling and your mind. And up until now, I feel like I'm ready to do what I've got to do. But that's just a personal opinion, and let anybody interpret it any way that they want. But yes, you do have to vote. This is the 2020 year, election-wise, is, in my opinion, the most important year that we've had the last 40 or 50 years. I don't like to get into too much deep politics, but I will tell you this right now, Xavier. In my lifetime, and I mean in my lifetime, the one president that I love so much that ran this country was Ronald Reagan. I have books of Ronald Reagan. I visited Ronald Reagan's library when I was in California. It's, in my opinion, when I get my wife Candy out to California, that will be something that I take her to. I love Ronald Reagan. But, again, I don't get into much politics, but this situation is one of those things where I don't mind going on the real and the rare because my voting has been real. Lack of voting has been real and rare. So how do you like that analogy? We'll tie that one in very nicely, right? But, yeah, I'll definitely be imposing my will to do what I feel we've got to do. Not because of the Black Lives Matter campaign, but this is something that's been building up over a sustained period over the past 4 years. But it certainly doesn't matter this time. Am I happy with the fact that the President of the United States decided to have a photo moment in front of a church? Were you happy with that display?
Oh, of course not, because I felt like he was mocking the entire thing.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought that was absolutely embarrassing to do something like that.
And something else I'm also not happy with, and I'll bring this up right now, is I'm not happy with the fact that his first campaign rally for his 2020 re-election bid is going to take place on June 19th in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm definitely not happy about that.
Well, I mean, again, you know what? We vote public officials in, and then we vote them out, basically, because of what we decide to do. And that's exactly what will occur come November. But now we have a body of work for this particular president of 4 years. And you know what? I think this will be the most anticipated election that we've seen in a long time. It will. Do I believe that you tweet your comments out? Not really. I don't think I wasn't brought up. I've always been a firm believer that state-of-the-art addresses to let the general public know what's going on are usually the most common way to do things. I realize that social media and get your word out is more prevalent in other ways, but not at key moments like that. But again, I don't want to go too deep into it. But I feel like I've gone deep enough. But I think that photo op that he had in front of the church was an absolute embarrassment. Do I think that putting the military in certain places if things don't cool down was a way to do things? Not really, but I understand it if it got out of control. But I'm not applauding the decision. But we can't lose sight of while we're on the air tonight, folks, okay? We're on the air because when a man got killed for all the wrong reasons because of a police officer that was way out of line. That's why we're on the air talking about this. That's why we probably doubled our broadcast time than we normally do, but it's necessary that we have the opportunity to extend it tonight more so than any other night because this is a very controversial subject. But I will tell you one thing, folks, if you don't get anything out of this broadcast of what I've said tonight, I do support the Black Lives Matter movement without a doubt, 100% in my mind and in my heart. I will, and I fully believe it's something that I'm comfortable doing. And I will do everything on our platforms, okay, to make sure that I promote it in a necessary way. Why do you think I'm using 6 broadcasts to do it? Because I do believe in Black Lives Matter. I do. That's why you're getting more time on this subject than you ordinarily would on any other subject. Not that you couldn't have it anyways, but this is something that's been building up over a sustained period of time. And now, thankfully, we both have the freedom to talk about it. And I'm not going out there and beeping out anything because it's not that kind of a subject. We're not saying anything wrong. We're trying to say a lot of things that are right about what's going on. A lot of innocent lives have mattered over the last so many things, from Rodney King to we're obviously talking about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and some of the other names that you brought up as well. And I'm glad a lot of people have stepped up.
And with that being said, Scott, I would like to thank you for allowing me to use this platform to address this issue and address this matter. I would like to thank you for using your entire platform for this issue and this matter to be addressed, whether it is on our show, whether it is on any other show. And I would like to also thank you for your support as you stand with us in solidarity in this movement and this fight that we, and I say we as in me and my fellow brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and elders of the black community are all going through right now. We thank you sincerely.
My pleasure, Xavier. You know, we live in the United States. Let's not kid ourselves. It's a melting pot. African Americans are about 16% of the population. I think Caucasians are, 50 to 60% from what I heard from Stephen A. Smith at one particular point. He talked about it. And then the melting pot is what we call the rest. So in my opinion, the way it is we all have to stay unified in this situation. We really, really do. And I tell you what, Black Lives do matter, and you're welcome, Xavier. It's something that we all have to do, and I'm glad that we all have to continue carrying on the beliefs that were set forth by Dr. Martin Luther King. We have to honor this man's memory. I know we've had a lot of civil rights people that have helped along the way, but Dr. Martin Luther King was a great person, and I think that with all the pain that he went through, I think for somehow, some way, he's smiling upstairs at long last, okay, it took an incident. If it took an incident of this nature for him to realize that he does have a dream, that all men are created equal, then hopefully this country has been woken up, okay, over the last few weeks for something that's been, I call it a caged lion, okay, and now this situation is no longer a caged lion. So with that said, okay, Xavier McKnight, let me go ahead and let everybody, I'm going to turn the floor over to you as to how you can let everybody get a hold of you, Xavier McKnight, and then we'll give you the ways to get a hold of us here on the network as well. Go ahead, Xavier.
Yes.
Take over.
Yes, you all can follow me on Twitter at XTMCKNIGHII. The two I's at the end are both capitalized. You can follow me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. You can send me a friend request on Facebook simply just by typing in Xavier McKnight. You can send me a request on LinkedIn by typing in Xavier McKnight.
All right, on our end, okay, you can follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. Our Facebook page is South Florida Tribune. Please like us. You'll get all the updates on Facebook. Instagram, South Florida Tribune. And I'm hoping to do a lot more promotional things with all of our broadcasts on Instagram in the not-so-distant future. We have a YouTube channel, which I'll be getting going once the pandemic allows us to know the coast is clear. So the YouTube channel is South Florida Tribune. Our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. Our email address is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's under Scott Morgenroth. WSAN Network consists of the Sports Exchange, South Florida Tribune podcast, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, and of course you are listening to The Real and the Rare with myself and Xavier McKnight, the X-Man. Fantasy Football with myself and Ryan Skolrud's another broadcast. Motor Man and Rude Dog, Rudy Reyes, a great friend of the broadcast. And I'm so excited about No Limits. Although you couldn't make that first episode, you'll definitely be invited on at one point to come on that broadcast. You can find the broadcast on www.southfloridatribune.com or wherever you can get your podcast, folks. So on behalf of Xavier McKnight, the X-Man, my name is Scott Morgenroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Hoping you have a great weekend. Please be safe during these trying times, and don't underestimate the fact that we are not out of the woods with COVID-19. There are too many people that are taking chances, and I have a feeling phase 2 will come soon if we don't get it figured out real soon. So good night, everybody, and we will see you on the next edition of The Real and the Rare. Good night, and God bless everybody from myself and
the X-Man, Xavier McKnight. Good night, everyone.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.